This is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shel Maalot. This week we have a fascinating program. Should every girl be going to seminary in Israel? We're packing off, many of us, our daughters now, sending them to Eretz Yisrael. So we're going to be speaking about girls education. Should girls be getting a secular education? OT, PT, finance. What happened to the Sarah by Hela, called Kvaida Bas Melech Pnima? What happened to the job of the Jewish woman being the mother? Altita Shtairis Yimecha. What is she doing in the workforce and sacrificing? All these questions we'll be addressing. We will have a panel of guests. We will have Rabbi Shmuel Feurst, the Dayan of the Agudath Yisroel of Illinois, the great Paisik of the Midwest. Rabbi Schneur, Aisenstark, a dean, a mechanech of 40 years, the dean of the Beis Yaakov Seminary in Montreal. Rabbi David Orlofsky, internationally acclaimed lecturer and educator. Dr. Leslie Klein, academic dean, Maalot, Baltimore. And then we'll also have Rabbi Shmuel Klein, who is from Torah Umesorah, director of Torah Umesorah. He's also a Ger Chassid. He's a writer, has written many Sfarim. He's a columnist, an author. He's a musmach of Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. Really fascinating panel. Before we start, I would like to say a thought about the Parsha. And my son-in-law, Rabbi Yada Goldvich, suggested, he said, instead of saying on last week's Parsha, most people listen Matzah Shabbos, say on next week's Parsha. So, I'm going to start doing that. So what do we lay next week? We learn about Vidui Maisa, Biarti HaKodesh Ben Abayis. Every number of years, 7 years, you come to the Beis HaMikdash, and they would bring all their leftover Maisers, the Maiser Ani, and all their other Maisers, and said, Biarti Min HaKodesh Ben Abayis, Nasativ La Levi. I gave the Maiser to the Levi, or La Ger, La Yosem V'Lalmana. I gave my Sa'ani away to the Ger, the Yosem, Almana. Kechol mitzvaysecha asher tzivisani. I did everything. Le'avarti mitzvaysecha. I didn't miss a mitzvah. Lo shachachti. Le'echalti mimenu ba'ayni. I didn't do anything wrong. I did all my obligations. Asisi kechol asher tzivisani. Imagine getting up and telling Hashem, Rabbeinu Shalom, Kavyachu, you did everything. Now here's something amazing. The Mishnah in Saita says, it says, he calls this parsha Vidui Maisa, the Vidui of Maisa. So the Sipernu here in Pasuk Yud Gimel asks a very interesting question. He says, where's the Vidui? Vidui is when you say bad things. Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Chatasi, Avisi, Peshaiti. Here he's saying, Asisi Kichalashat Sivisadi, Leavarti Mitzvaysecha. I didn't do anything. I wasn't over in a single Avera. I followed exactly. Checklist. Check, right? So the Sipernu says, really interesting teretz. He says, you know what the Vidi is? Because the Maisa was supposed to be given to the Bechor. But the Bechor is sinned, and therefore we give them to the Levi, etc. So that's the Vidui. Now, I find that a difficult teretz. First of all, that happened like thousands of years ago. The Bechor, so like weird that I'm coming now. I don't even know about it. And why don't you mention it? I mean, the Rambam Paskins, I think it's in Perek Beis or Perek Gimel of Hilchos Tshuva, that every Vidui, the rule is you have to lifrei tached. You have to mention all the Chatayim. You don't mention anything here about the Kayin. So where's the Vidui? It's not mentioned. So I want to suggest a different teretz. Why is it called Vidui Maisa when you talk about all the wonderful things that you've done? Let me share with you. There was a forger. His name was Adolfo Kaminsky, and he worked at a cleaning shop. He became an expert in ink, removing ink from ties, from clothing. Comes World War II, and there's a 3-month window in Paris where the Jews could escape before the Nazis start deporting them. So they started bringing him passports and said, it says Jew here in red ink, can you get it out? And he starts working, and he realizes he's absolutely a fabulous forger. Because a page falls out, he's able to replicate it. He says, I was able to make documents that were indecipherable from the real things. They were just as good. And there was one window, we had 3 days to save 300 lives, and he was busy issuing the papers, and he fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. He was up for 2 days in a row, and he wanted to sleep for 2 hours, and he said he slept for 4 hours. And when he woke up, He looked at his watch. He said, 2 extra hours. 8 people died now because of me, will get deported because of me. And he lived in that terror. I didn't save enough. I didn't save enough people. You know, Schindler, at the end of Schindler's List, the book, I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was buying Jews for a couple of dollars each, and he opens up a drawer, and there's like a pair of cufflinks, and he starts crying. He says, that was 2 Jewish lives I could have saved. So the question is, here's a story somebody shared with me. Everybody remembers the Holy Ramash, the great Chabadska Rebbe. He used to have a line. So he says, this fellow came, this shliach, he was someplace in Podunk, someplace in the world, I don't know, some remote part, maybe in Australia or something. And they sent him there with lunch money for 6 months, and they said, go establish a community. So it's 10 years later, and the guy has built a shul. He built a day school. There's 150 kids in it, and he has one donor, this Freya fellow from someplace in Podunk, Australia, who donated the money for the girls' school. He says, let's go. I'm going to bring you to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and we'll tell him everything you accomplished. They get on a plane. They come, and they're standing in line. And this Freya guy doesn't know from nothing. He's wearing like a Sherlock Holmes hat. It has like a plaid hat. It has a brim in the front and a brim in the back. What do you need 2 brims on one hat for? Weiß ich nicht. So they come to the Rebbe, and this guy says, look at this guy. He donated the girls' school. Our day school. We have 150 kids. Like, in other words, can you please give him a huge shikayach? He looks at the Rebbe expectantly. So the Ramash looks at him, and he says, points at the guy. He says, thank you. Then he says, but I want you to know, whatever you did, you can do double. And then he turns to the chassid, who really talk about the Mesiras Nefesh, and I want you to know, he points at him, whatever you did, you can do double. Amazing. And you know, when you often look at pictures of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you see he has like a little bit of a haunted look in his face. And I think he really lived his life with this. He probably went to sleep at night thinking, whatever I've done, and wow, did he do, I could have done double. So what's Vidui Maisa? Vidui Maisa is, it's the end of the year we read this, right before Rosh Hashanah. But it's maybe the saddest Vidui. What do we say? I did everything I could. I checked all the boxes. I did whatever you said. I was a good boy. I checked all the boxes. And you know what Torah tells us? It's Vidui Maisa. How do you say that? We say also, and what do we say? We say a person is a tzelem elikim. He's in the dmus of the Kaviyachal. But on the other hand, what do we say about Kaviyachal? El mitem tidamyun kel. Who could you? Mad dmus tarchula. He has no dmus. You can't put any dmus on Kaviyachal. You can't put it into any box. You can't fathom it. And if we're tzelem elikim, what does it mean about us? On some level, mad dmus tarchulanu. Mitidamyuni. Who could you compare us to? How does a person say, Asisi kichelashet zivisani? I fulfilled all my potential? It says, Vanefesh leitamale. So this vidui summons you and me to a greater calling. Did we fulfill our potential? Did you or I care more than others thought is wise? Were our dreams so big that they scared us? Did you embrace risk? Or did you live your life in a cocoon of safety? Did I dare to embrace who I am or live a life that others expected me to? Did you see failing as just a step forward? Did you embrace your potential, your deepest dreams, or live in the box society made for you? Did you try to say about yourself, El mitidamyun, nobody compares to me. Mad mus tarichulai, because I am b'tzelem elikim? Did you try to do double? Or did you say, Asisi kichelashet zivisani, I did everything I could? That's it. I can't do any more. So maybe this is really a vidui. It's maybe the saddest vidui of all when a person says, I checked the boxes. Before we go to our guests, I would like to do the riddle of this week. The Rambam in Perek Yud Gimel of Hilchos Reitzeach says, a zaken, this week's parsha we say, Azev Tazi, you're supposed to load the animal, unload your friend's animal, ki isira shayr saynacha, etc. But if it's a zaken, she'ein darkei litain, it's eina lefi kvaydei, you pater, you don't have to load or unload. So the Rambam writes, so, v'im haya chassid, v'oisa lefnim mishuris hadin, he should. Right? He should be pyrik. He's a big Rosh Hashiva, he's a Rav, he's a Zakin, the animals is struggling, you don't have to, but if you're a chassid, you should. And you meichel on your kovid. So the question is, that in Hilchos Agudath, the Rambam writes in Perek Aleph Halacha Beis, that Hoya ha'ed chacham gadol, v'hoya bebezdin pachas v'menu b'chachma, right? Hoyel ve'en kvaydei sheyelech lefneim, right? Asay shall cover that Torah Adif. A chacham is not allowed to go to court to testify if it's a bezdin pachas v'menu, because it's a b'zayin HaTorah. To load a donkey, the Rambam writes, chassid, it's a chassidus to do it. It's ain't a lefi kvaydei. Imagine loading the donkey, right? The donkey could step on you, the donkey could make you dirty, but what's the lashon Rambam? Haya chassid v'oisa lefnei mishuris hadin, be meichel on your kovid. But to go to court, to bezdin, to say ages for somebody who needs it, no, then you say, it's b'zayin HaTorah, right? Asay shall cover that Torah adif, v'yesh lo lehimanea. Ram says you should refrain from doing it. Why by zakil le'enafi kvaydai, by te'ina prika te'ina, the Rambam says do it. Why by edus, he says you don't do it. If you have an answer, call it in, and we will announce the winners at the end of the show. Let's go to our wonderful guests.
We have the honor of having with us from Chicago, Rav Hagoyin Rav Shmuel Feurst. He's the Rav of the Agudath Yisroel of Chicago. He is the Dayan of the Agudath, and he the famous Paisik from Chicago. Welcome, Rav Feurst.
Yes.
So Rabbi Feurst, we had on a parent who was crying that they sent their child to seminary. They sent 3 daughters to seminary, and they said the cost is around, with airfare and everything, it's between $25,000 and $30,000 a kid.
Yeah.
And because it's considered, if you don't send your kid to seminary today, it's going to shter shidduchim. And I know the mir is 5.
If they can't afford it, they should not send them to Eretz Yisrael. There's such a thing as b'tachan and Rabbi Shalom. The zivik is already written before Abba Yom Karim Siyas Vlad. Going to Eretz Yisrael will not make a difference if they can get married or not. If they can't afford to go to Yisrael, then they should not go to Yisrael. I think it's a highway robbery that they're charging such high amounts in Eretz Yisrael. They don't, for Bochum, they don't even charge that amount, and they don't even give them they don't even give Shabbos. They don't even give even meals. Then, according to the people who know, it costs them about $8,000 a year each student. The rest is pure profit.
So, Rabbi Feurst, what could we do as a community if it's costing parents $25,000 to $30,000?
I think they should stop sending their children. They should stop sending their children to Eretz Yisrael. If a bunch of parents get together or the school gets together and makes their own seminary, and continue after 12th grade, make your own seminary. It'll be a lot cheaper and make a lot of parents happy. Who says you have to go to Yisrael?
And do you find that, first, that the year in Eretz Yisrael is worth the $25,000 or $30,000? Do you find that to be the case as a head of a community? Do you see that it's worth that impact?
For certain families, it's a beautiful thing to go to Yisrael. Certain families, it's not necessary. I think it depends on each family. Certain it's good for the kids to get away. Certain ones, it doesn't make a difference. I think if we change the trend, not everyone has to go to Yisrael. It'll help a lot of families, and it'll bring a lot of shalom bayis in Klal Yisrael.
Rabbi Feurst, it was a great honor to have you on with us. Thank you so much.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Montreal, Canada, Reb Schneur Aisenstark, who's a principal of Beis Yaakov of Montreal for 40 years, and he was also the head of the seminary in Montreal for over 10 years. He's a Talmud of Reb Mendel Kravitz, Reb Yeshivas, Reb Yitzchak, and a Yelid of Eretz Yisrael. It's an honor to have you with us, Reb Schneur.
Thank you. You don't know me, but I know you.
How's that?
How do I know you? Because I'm a Talmud of Yeshiva Shel Maalot.
Oh, really? That's nice.
And on Motzei Shabbos, my Melava Malka is listening to you.
Yeah. Okay, shkayach. So, Rabbi Schneur, as a mechanach, a girl comes to you and she says, I want to go to seminary because all my friends are going to seminary. And you meet with the parents, and the parents say, Parnassa, it's $35,000 to send the girl to seminary. The seminary is $25,000. You have the tickets. You have to give her some spending money, et cetera, et cetera. And they say, Rav Schneur, it's a lot of money. Can I know her? My house is Bruchei Banim. And she's saying, well, all my friends are going. It's going to Schneur for a Shidduch. And what about all the incredible inspiration I'm going to get in Eretz Yisrael? And the parents look to you and they say, we don't want to deprive our child. On the other hand, it's very hard for us. What do you say?
I ask them, first of all, where are you going to get the money? So if they say they have it and they're well-to-do, no, listen, Gesundheit, it's beautiful to be in Eretz Yisrael. But if you don't have the money and you have to borrow it and you may become a loy v'rosh of a loy yeshalem, what right do you have to do to send them to Eretz Yisrael? In Burr Park, in New York, there are quite a few seminaries. In Muncie, there are seminaries. In Lakewood, there are seminaries. There are seminaries all over. But so why are they sending them? They're sending them because of peer pressure. Do you know how bad peer pressure is? It's like impossible. It runs our lives. Let me just tell you one little story. Quite a few years ago, a balabos here went to a gevir, and he asked him to lend him $15,000 so he'll be able to send his daughter to Eretz Yisrael. The gevir says, I didn't send my daughters to Eretz Yisrael. I don't believe that kids have to go to Eretz Yisrael in order to get a good chinuch. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take the $15,000 and I'll write you out a check, and you can cash it when she gets married, and you can keep the money. I'm not lending it to you. I'll give it to you if she stays home and goes to seminary at home. It's not going to seminary or not. So the fellow told him, listen, I know how to be mechanech my children. You be mechanech your children. I have to send my daughter. Right? And he went and borrowed it someplace else. There's no way that this man can pay it back. There's no way. I mean, a Kodesh Baruch Hu can give him and help him. So he becomes a lover rush of a lo yeshalim. I mean, why can't she go to seminary in America? You want to be in the Heilige Land? I understand. Is it mashpia? I understand. It gives you a shot in the arm. So send her there in the summertime. They have tours, and she can see the whole of Eretz Yisrael for a few $1,000s, not for $25,000. It's mind-boggling, but it's all because of peer pressure. Everybody is going. You can have the best seminary next door. No, you got to go. Kvoid Bas Melech Penima is a different issue.
So, Rabbi Aisenstark, would you say then? I mean, is there a real value? I mean, what is the value? I have a different question. Let me rephrase this. But let me take that out. Let me take that. Let me do it differently.
Yeah.
If we sit down with a girl and we say, listen, we can't afford it. We'll send you to a wonderful seminary here, and the child learns the value of responsible behavior, as opposed to irresponsible behavior, possibly irresponsible behavior, which is going into debt, maybe disadvantaging her other siblings who won't be able to get what they need because they borrowed heavily for one. I mean, is there a value to teaching our children, hey, there's a lot of things you would like to do. You would like to go on a vacation someplace. Let's live within our means. What about that value? Why don't we talk about that value?
Yeah, but you're right, except I don't think that a girl that's graduating high school has value of money. She doesn't understand what money is. I have somebody in my family, I don't want to give it, that the father told her, if you don't go to seminary, you go next door to seminary. When you get married, I'm going to send you and your husband, and I'm going to take the $20,000 and send you and your husband to Eretz Yisrael. She refused it. I mean, I know the girl. She refused it. She said, everybody's going to Eretz Yisrael. Peer pressure kicks value in the foot.
But I want to share with you, when I was only 12 and a half, my father was Rav in a shul, and he was a Rebbe, and it was a question of making a fancy bar mitzvah. He didn't have the money, and I said, it's fine. Herring and cholent on paper plates is fine too. And most of my friends, or many of them, did have fancy bar mitzvahs, but the lesson of that bar mitzvah stays with me till today. It's like, you know what? There are times you live within your means, you do what's right, you do what you could afford, you do what's responsible. And I remember that message from the bar mitzvah decades later. And what's wrong with teaching a child that living responsibly? I don't know.
It's not what's wrong. You're supposed to do what you were taught. But there are so many of those kids out there that look what he had at his bar mitzvah, and look what he did at his bar mitzvah. It's peer pressure, and we live because of peer pressure. We have 2 cars and whatnot. We send our wives to work. And it's not all the shem shemaim. Sure, they help out in the beginning. But why do they continue working after the husband goes and because they have to have 2 cars and they have to have this and they have to have that, and then it's the society that we live in.
Rabbi Aisenstark, let me ask you that question. You have a fellow. They need the money. I don't know. He wants to learn in Kol, or I don't want to sound like I'm anti-Kol. He wants to go to school, or he's just not earning enough. Whatever the case may be. So his wife says, I'm going to go to work. So what happens? The kids grow up by babysitters and by daycare and etc. How do you put a value on a mother being with the children vis-a-vis the house having parnasa, the husband being able to? If somebody asks you as a mechanach, he says, do I support my husband so he can stay in Kol? Do I stay home with my kids? How would you respond? Like, what's the Das Torah on this? What is your statement?
Well, I can't give you Das Torah because I'm not on the Madrega to give you Das Torah, but I'm giving you Schneur Aisenstark's opinion. It definitely has a Wirkung on the kids that a mother works full time. It is horrible. It's not only the babysitter, but the mother comes home harried and has to make supper and has to put the kids to sleep, and she's nervous. She worked the whole day. Well, she's given it skewed our whole existence. Our existence is for our kids. And they said, well, I have quality time with them. Don't give me quality time, Who spending time with the kids, just reading them a bedtime story and have patience to read them the bedtime story, and or play a game with them, or help them with the homework. It's there. That's another issue.
But Schneur, what about the value of them being able to see their father in Kol and coming home and learn every night? There's a value there too.
Learning home every night is beautiful. And so I'm not saying that the mother shouldn't help. Gedolei Yisroel in Europe, they help too. But you know how they helped? They helped because they lived in the back of the store, and the mother took care of the store, but they had the kids at her feet. She was with her kids. She didn't go out downtown to work, and it was with pressure, but she was at home. So if a mother goes and helps a little bit, a few hours a day. Let's say she's a teacher, right? So she works 3 hours a day. 3 hours a day when the kids are in school, I can understand. But she has to. I want a girl that went to college so that she has a commodity that she can earn a living. What happened to your ksuba? What happened? It's olam hafuch. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and I'm telling you, I can't prove it statistically, but kids are. We find so many kids that need psychological help. We find so many kids going off the derech. I'm not saying that they're going to go off the derech because of that. There's a tremendous amount of factors that make a kid go off. But the mother is not there. She's really not there for her kids. Who says the father should learn? Avadei should learn. That's a kiyum of Klal Yisrael. But in his own placer, not in his wife's placer. She can be a little bit of a help. I'm not saying no, but you got to know where your priorities are. And we're a girl. No, we're sending the girls back to college to get professions. That's what we're doing. 50 years ago, when the kids went to college, so we told them it's not a nice place to be. It has tremendous hashpah on you, etc. We turned the tide, and we sent them to seminaries, right? And they went to seminaries, and it's already a style to go to seminaries. 50 years ago, it wasn't a style to go to seminaries. But today, the pressure to get a shidduch and to have a profession, because otherwise, well, I want to learn. Okay, what are you going to hold up a gun to learn? There are red lines, and so we're sending him to college. Baruch Hashem that there are places that they can go to a college in a kosher way, whether it's Torah or online or something of that sort. But we're making them into professionals in order to be able to get a shidduch, a ben Torah. That's a ben Torah. Is a ben Torah on somebody else's shoulders, and ultimately it'll be on his kid's shoulders. He won't see it. You don't see it. It creeps up on you. You don't see it.
Rabbi Aisenstark, what would you say if about a girl working in a secular environment? She got a job as an OT, a PT, an accountant. She's a bookkeeper. She's in accounting, and she gets a job working for Cooper Library and Price Waterhouse, Ernst & Young, etc.
You got to know the setting that she's working at. You have to know what the situation is, and that she doesn't find herself yichud or something of that sort. That she's in a. I think you have to judge every situation separately. I don't think that that women should go to work. My mother didn't go to work. She raised her kids. I don't know, Rabbi Lichtenstein, if your mother went to work. I don't know her.
My mother was a teacher for maybe 40 or 50 years, a first grade teacher.
Okay, so she worked for 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day. I said before, right, that if you work a few hours, gesundheit, if that to help, and you're machshiv Torah, right? You got a chinuch in Beis Yaakov that Torah is the best, and you learn your Harvard, and you learn Torah, and you learn to love it, and you want your husband to learn Torah. The loving of Torah, that's what causes you to get a ben Torah, etc. But anyway, I can't. I tell my own grandchildren, my granddaughters, I can't believe that you're working. I just can't. Well, we can't live. We can't pay our bills.
And how do you respond to that?
You're not responsible for the bills. Your husband is. He wrote a ksuba, and he's responsible for it. How is he responsible for it? Let him figure it out. The Rebbeinu Shalom gives parnasa, not your work. And we believe that the Rebbeinu Shalom gives parnasa, and they believe that the Rebbeinu Shalom gives parnasa. Maybe it's a lack of emunah. I don't know what it is.
So now, Rabbi, you're not saying it als the din of kol kfuda bas melech panima. You're just saying because of the responsibility to raise children.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the home, right? But I'm saying it for the responsibility of raising children, right?
Now, why don't we hear, Rabbi, how come nobody else says this message?
How come because this message is not heard. You know why they're not saying it? Because it says, what's the use saying it? It's not heard. People, they laugh. I don't know. They laugh. They don't laugh because it's emes. I'm sure that it's emes. What I'm saying, but it's not heard because we live in a different world. We live in the fat of the land, and we want everything. Every pitchivka that comes out, we have to buy it. Avani besocham. I'm not giving Musar here. I'm not giving Musar, except we got to know where we're headed. We're headed to take a look how many mental health professionals we have to take care of our kids, because we didn't take care of them. We don't have time. We're nervous. We're Torah to make a living. Why should a woman let her be Torah in raising her kids? Let her. If the kids are out of school, let her sleep for an hour. And so when the kids come home, she'll have koyach for them. And let the kids know that I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm not here to make for a second car.
Rabbi Aisenstark, thank you very much for your very poignant point. I think it's so powerful. I just want to stop right over here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us Dr. Leslie Ginsburg Klein, one of the great mechanchim of women here in America. She's the academic dean of Maalot in Baltimore. Welcome, Dr. Klein.
Thank you so much.
So, seminaries, all the girls are going off to seminaries now. It costs parents, I don't know, $40,000 a year when you count, the cost of the tickets. People put themselves into debt. And it's become de rigueur. It's considered if you don't, you sort of neglected your child. You're almost a neglectful or an abusive parent if you don't send your daughter to seminary. And people, you have, Klein, we have large families. The majority of people really struggle to earn a living, to pay their debts, etc. And it gives a lot of parents white hair. And my question to you as a mechanech, what is the value of going to Israel for seminary for a girl? And after that, we'll do some follow-up questions. Is if they do go, what would you hope they bring home from it? But let's start. What is the value? I'm an accountant. I make $150,000 a year. I have a house full of kids. I'm getting by the skin of my teeth. My daughter's entire class is going to seminary. It's shidduchim. It's education. Her Yerusha Shamayim is at stake. Dr. Klein, what do I do? Do I take a second mortgage out? Do I go borrowing from gamachs? Please, Dr. Klein, give me some advice.
Okay, so like everything else in Chinuch, the principle that should be guiding us is Chanuch Nar Al Pi Darko, that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for all students. You have to look at each individual student and think about what is good for him, what is good for her. In the case of seminary in Israel, so seminary in Israel is great for some girls, it's not for others. For others, it could even be a disaster. It's not appropriate for them. And each parent really needs to think about, is this something that is good for my daughter? And not think about the peer pressure and the craziness of shidduchim. Okay, plenty of girls go to seminary in America and they get fine shidduchim, and a girl can go to seminary in Israel and struggle to find her shidduch. We need to have a munah. Okay, Hashem's the one who makes shidduchim. It's not, that shouldn't really be a concern. So if, there's a concept in Torah Ketorah Eretz Yisrael. I mean, seminary can be a beautiful thing for the right student. Now, if it's at the expense of a family bankrupting themselves for shalom bayis, then I don't know that that's worth it. That's a real consideration that parents need to take into account. If their daughter is the type that's going to be miserable until Hanukkah, there's this idea that goes around, everyone's miserable until Hanukkah. Okay, first of all, not everybody's miserable until Hanukkah. And if your daughter's really going to be miserable, that's half the year. If she's really going to be miserable for half the year, I don't know that that's worth that. Is that worth spending $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 for your daughter to be miserable for half the year? I think that every parent really needs to do a real cheshbon, and every girl needs to do a real cheshbon. Like, is this for her? Or, you're outsourcing your daughter's education at a very crucial point in her life.
So, Dr. Klein, you put forth a few parameters. You said, well, for some girls it's good, and for some girls it's not good. Well, that's very vague. As a mechanach, I'm a parent. I don't know. Is my daughter, I think, is a fantastic girl. She's amazing. She's just perfect. Which girl is it good for? Which girl isn't it good for? And as an addendum to that, part B of that question is, it's going to stress me and my wife to have to pay for the chinuch. It's also going to stress me to have to go visit her. It's also going to stress me that we're going to miss her. So my question to you is, even if it is good for her, how much value is it? Like, is it $35,000 of value? Is it my white hair of value? Like, I just need more flesh on the bones than for some girls it's good, for some girls it's not. And yes, ain't Torah Ketorah Eretz. I need more meat.
Okay, so first of all, I want to start by saying that not all seminaries are created equal. There are seminaries in Eretz Yisrael that are fine educational institutions that will be dedicated to your daughter's chinuch. There are other seminaries that are run more like a summer camp, and there are other seminaries that are run, frankly, like a business. And if you're going to go forth and do the investment, so you should do some real research and make sure that you're sending your daughter to a seminary that's really going to provide a good chinuch while she's there. Now, you asked who is it good for, who's it not good for. Number one thing is to really ask your daughter, because a lot of girls feel so pressured into it, but they don't really want to go. They don't want to go. They know they're going to be homesick away from home in a year. So, you can a little bit know from your daughter, how did she if she went away for summer camp, how did she react? You can start to get a sense in terms of the homesickness. The other piece, it's harder to answer. It's how's your daughter going to do with no supervision and with that level of independence. And there's some girls who will thrive on that and will grow, and there's some who it can be catastrophic. Now, in terms of what is the value, so what we would hope seminary would do And this is the same thing that I hope all Chinuch Habanos should do, from K through 12, seminary, and beyond, is to instill a love of learning and a connection to Torah. Because if you want your daughter to retain everything she learned in Beis Yaakov, and you want her to retain what she achieved in seminary, when she goes out into the secular work world, when she goes to graduate school in a secular environment, she has to stay connected. There has to be a grounding. And the way you continue to grow is through learning.
Can she do that in America? Can she do that in America?
Yeah, 100%. There are wonderful seminaries in America.
So let me come back to that question. So
right.
Let me rephrase the question. You mentioned that there are many that are. You said there are those that are businesses.
Right.
And they're run by businesses, and it's like we have 200 girls at 40,000. It costs it's $25,000 a year. That's $5 million in income. And it's just run as a business. And it's a very profitable business for many of them.
Right.
There are those that are party schools, and when I dated, I remember girls saying, "Yeah, my seminary there was a party from beginning to end." And there are those that do serious learning. So my question is, as a mechanech, and you have hundreds of girls who go through your school, give us some type of a sense. What is the value? It's interesting. We spoke about burial in Eretz Yisrael. And today it's like if you don't bury your parents there. And then we had Rav Sternbuch who writes, it's an aveira to bring your parents. And we had Gedolim who say you're destroying the family. It's a terrible thing. Rabbi Yaakov said, we had Rabbi Yaakov Zanikel say, you're disconnecting children they can't go daven, but it's an aveira to bury in Eretz Yisrael. So but it becomes crowdthink. So as a mechanech,
right.
What is, for the majority, is it worth the 25, 35, or 40, or would you be better off spending the time with your child, spending extra time, take your child out once a week to dinner instead of spending that money, to talk to her about things, to stay connected? Try to give us what is the real value. Do you see it as life-changing, or is it, Jesus, just some type of a mishagas that we've accepted as a community, send her to a local seminary?
It's somewhere in the middle, and I know you want a black and white answer, but with chinuch, there's never a black and white answer. You're never going to find a black and white answer with chinuch because it's just going to differ. What's the value? There is a value in girls seeing the way people live in Eretz Yisrael. It's a much less materialistic society, and there's a value in seeing that. There's a value in just kind of seeing the way other people prioritize things in life, of being exposed to different people and the way they live, especially if you've grown up in a very homogenous community. Everyone on your block is like you. Everyone in your school is like you. There's an amazing thing to spend Shabbos from Moshav, and spend Shabbos in the Old City, and spend Shabbos in Mea Sharim. I mean, it can be really a wonderful growing experience. And, of course, being exposed to the wonderful Rabbanim and Mechanchos who are in Eretz Yisrael and teaching. There is real value to it.
Okay, let me ask you another question.
Okay.
For thousands of years, there were no girls' schools.
Okay.
And when Sarah Schneur came along and she established sometime in the early 1900s the first girls' school at the time, it created a lot of havoc, and many people, including many Rabbanim, were opposed to it. And
right.
It took some 5 to 10 years for them to realize how right she was. And they said, no, girls, and even today, you find a lot of conflict. If you look at, the more Hasidic Paiskim, Rav Vosner and the Kleisenberger Rebbe and the Dever Yaakov, he says, in girls' schools, they should only be teaching the girls, Chumash. They shouldn't even be teaching Ramban or Rashi, anything because we have to teach them the absolute minimum. Now, for the most part, the world has gone the other way, and they recognize the value of educating our daughters, notwithstanding the fact that the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, actually, I think it's in Reish Mem Vav or Reish Mem Tes, say that it's a b'di'evet to teach women Torah Shabal B'ksav even Torah B'ksav is a b'di'evet, Shulchan Aruch writes. We've gone in the other direction, and we realize that the world has changed. And I know it's interesting because many people believe halacha never changes. Here is a position where halacha actually did change. And they said, we now accept it. Now, isn't seminary taking it a little bit overboard? Like we've established, we send our girls to school, and they learn Chumash, and they learn Ramban, and they debate the topics, and now a whole year just of learning. Well, is that really important? And explain, if you believe it is, what is the importance of it?
Yes, 1,000%. 1,000%, yes. Okay, I'll tell you two reasons why. Okay, one, let's talk about Sarah Schneur, okay? So Sarah Schneur started Beis Yaakov because she saw there was a whole generation of girls and young women who were really idealistic, and they were being attracted by all the isms of the day. Okay, socialism and feminism, communism, all of these movements that were secular social movements in Poland. And they were going off the derech, and they were in these in state schools because the government had compulsory education, much like our government today has compulsory education. And so they were in these state schools, and they're learning these high-level secular studies, and they have nothing Jewish to balance it. All they have are, to them, Judaism seemed like superstition. They had no intellectual connection to Judaism. They didn't have an emotional connection either. And truth is, with Chinuch, a lot of times that goes hand in hand. If you learn, you understand, you feel connected. So they didn't. So Sarah Schneur starts Beis Yaakov, okay? Now that's when you're talking about when there's compulsory education up until, high school. But now you're talking about you are having regularly, our daughters are going out into the secular workplace. Some are going onto secular college campuses for undergraduate, which, if we have time, I can share my thoughts on that. I think with so many from college options that there's really no reason to do that. But then they do go to secular programs for graduate school, which is something different. But we're sending our daughters into those environments, and you're not going to give them that additional level of learning. Their secular learning has grown exponentially, and their secular exposure is growing exponentially. You need to match that. Their Kodesh learning has to be at least it has to be more inspiring.
You're saying that the old concept of Zel Umazeh Asalekim, when our daughters are being hit with a boatload of information, both from media and in school, we can't say, okay, we're going to starve you religiously, and your religious education will remain, stunted, thwarted, because of, at the same time, when you just walk in the street, if you have a phone today, you're being flooded with all this other information. We have to match them so that we have the tools. We give them the tools, right, the armamentarium to combat all the other information that they are receiving. Is that your argument?
That is my argument, and it's the information, but it's the feeling. Rebbitzin Etzi Rosenbaum, who's the Menaheles of Maalot, Baltimore Seminary, she always says that a person who doesn't learn doesn't grow. If you're not learning, you're not growing. Okay, and if you're not growing, then you're going down. Think about when I'm talking about education, stressing education, I'm not talking about busy work, homework. I'm not talking about, piling on assignments for no reason. Okay, I'm talking about inspiration, not memorization. Okay, but if Chinuch's about inspiration and about instilling in girls a love of learning and a love of Torah, that's what's going to carry them through. I'm thinking about myself when I started working in the secular workplace. So I started around that same time, I started doing Nach Yomi. I learned a parak of Navi every single day. Okay, and oftentimes I would learn on my commute. So literally I'm carrying Torah with me. Literally. I have a Tanakh in my bag, okay, in my purse when I go to work. Okay, that's the kind of thing that keeps you grounded.
So let me follow this up with another question.
Okay.
You have today, we live in a society, certainly if you want your husband to go to Kollel, but even if not, many families need two breadwinners at home. So a girl is faced with the following crossroads. She can go and become a teacher, which for the most part, jobs are somewhat scarce, and pay is somewhat, frail.
Wait, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Jobs are scarce where?
Well, if you go to a place like Lakewood.
Okay, go anywhere else, and jobs. The schools are desperate to find women who will teach.
Well, when you
so
say
it could be in Lakewood, they're scarce, but
I would say Lakewood. I would say Borough Park. I would say Flatbush. I would say wherever you have an abundance of young Orthodox women who are Haredi, over there is it's a buyer's market on the school's part. Now, if you go out of town or you go where there is not an abundance, over there's a dearth of teaching jobs. Okay. So,
I don't think they're as. I hear you, but I even think in town it's not what it was 20 years ago.
Okay.
That so many girls are going into OT, PT. I actually think that is markedly changing, and that our best and our brightest are not going into chinuch the way they used to be.
Okay. So now you have a girl. She has a choice. She can go into chinuch, and chinuch is not a high-paying field.
Right.
Probably the lowest-paying field, right?
Right.
Practically, of all the white-collar professions. And or she has a choice. She can become an OT, a PT, an attorney, a doctor, name what it is, at a sacrifice, clearly, to her Yiddishkeit, because of the fact that, a teacher has to prepare. She's working. She's growing the minds of the children, etc. So she says, wow, what do? Do I choose to go into one of these more profitable fields at a cost to my ruchnius, right? Or do I go into, on the other hand, I could support my husband and children, or do I go into teaching, which is going to be at the cost? My husband may have to leave Kyle early. The house may not have what it needs because I'm not earning, but on the other hand, I will have the ruchnius. And she comes to you and she says, Dr. Klein, what do I do? What do you advise her?
I would tell her to stay in chinuch. I've had this conversation, and I've told them to stay in chinuch. I'll tell you why. First of all, what you say is right. The best part about teaching is the preparing. I mean, that's now when do I really get to learn? When I have to give a shiur. Then I get to sit and learn. It's part of my job. It's great. It's fantastic. It is the best part about teaching is the preparing and the being able to stay learning. But that's not even why. It's about the community. It's about the community globally. I've many times had these students come into my office, and I say, a couple of things. Number one is, if you want to teach and you have the passion to teach, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy being an OT. You're not going to be happy being a computer programmer. So why are you doing it? You have something you love and you're good at. You're not going to be happy, and then no one wins. You don't win. Your husband doesn't win. Your family doesn't win if you're coming home from work miserable because you're not doing what you really love. Okay, that's one piece. Number two piece, yes, it is low paying. It's true, but there are perks to chinuch. You can get a tuition discount for your students. You have a bunch of kids in school, that starts to really, really add up. And the money that you save versus if you'd be working and paying full tuition, that's a significant amount of money. There are perks to teaching. You also don't have to spend as much in childcare because you're usually working the same time as your kids. Those women who need to find school ends at 3:30 and they don't get home from work until 5, that last hour and a half is a nightmare. I mean, it's just dreadful to figure out who's picking up your kids and what are they doing for that for that hour and a half. So there's a great advantage there. The other piece, I don't need to answer that. Rabbi Kaplan, Allah Shalom, answered that. She was asked this question. She spoke about it. I mean, she wrote about it, about her students saying, "What do? I want to support in Kollel." And she said, "Go into chinuch." So go into chinuch.
Now.
And maybe you're going to do with a little less, okay? And I chas v'shalom don't want to wish poverty on anyone, chas v'shalom, okay? But a little bit the standards of the community have gotten much more extreme. Of what's considered what you need to have is a lot more than it used to be, and maybe we don't need to have that much. Again, God forbid, I'm not saying no one should be poor. Everyone should have food, be able to pay for their kids' food and clothing. I'm not talking about that. But okay, so maybe you will do with a little less. But the problem is, if we're telling all the girls in the community not to go into chinuch, who's staffing our schools? And then we talk about why girls today seem so uninspired. Okay, well, if you're telling all the women who would be teachers not to teach, then who's going to be teaching in the schools? And then what? You have the mothers are working full time, and we don't know who's teaching in the schools because we've told all the women who want to go into teach not to go into education. Then what's happening to the next generation? There's no, to quote like Rabbi and Kaplan and Sarah Schneur, there's no higher or holier calling than teaching, than chinuch. So I don't have all the answers, but we can't have there be a reality where we're telling girls not to teach.
Dr. Klein, one last question. So I'm a girl, and I don't want to go into chinuch. I don't really enjoy it, or I feel that I want my husband to learn, and I want to be able to support him, or I think I want to be. And I have a choice. I can go to, Torah, where I get OTPT, or I can go to Columbia, where I know if I go to Columbia, I'll have better job opportunities, I'll earn more, etc. And it's not a money thing as far as the cost of tuition, right? Even though Columbia is probably triple what Torah is. Torah,
Okay.
I want to give a disclaimer. I'm on the board of Torah, but don't let that affect you.
I taught at Torah for many years, and I'm a big fan of Torah.
Okay. And on the other hand, you could go to Columbia and have that name on your diploma, and it's possible that the education is better. Let's assume, for the purpose of this question, let's assume the education is even better. And my name is Razy, and I'm from Flatbush. And I come to you and I say, Dr. Klein, what do I do? Do I sacrifice quality for a Hamish environment, assuming that that's the case? Or maybe it's not the case, or do you say, no, absolutely not? How would you respond?
Okay, so if Razy was coming and asking me about undergrad, then I would say, 100% go to Torah, 100%, because for the undergraduate college campuses today are very problematic on many levels. I mean, just politically and their stance on Israel, many of the values that are espoused are very antithetical to Torah, and the social environment is not a social environment that is consonant with the values of the Frum community. So if we're talking about undergrad, and you could go to you were going between Torah and Columbia, and you could go to Lander College for Women in Manhattan, where I taught for many years, or you can go to Torah and Flatbush. I would say for sure, absolutely, go to college in a Frum environment. In fact, Maalot in Baltimore, that's also it's a seminary, and it's an undergraduate college program. With a program like that existing, where you can get an education that is comparable to what you would get in undergrad elsewhere, I do not see why anyone would choose. If you have the option of a Frum undergraduate program, I don't see any reason why one would choose, why you would choose to go elsewhere, why you would choose to go to a secular college campus and be exposed to everything there. And I don't mean it from a danger, it's so dangerous. Okay, leaving that aside, it's unpleasant. It's just not an environment where a Beis Yaakov graduate is going to feel comfortable and thrive. Okay, she'd be happy. I mean, I personally, I went to a Jewish undergraduate college. I wanted to be able to participate in school activities and extracurriculars, and you can't really do that if you're in a secular college. I mean, first, everything's on Shabbos, and there's so many issues. There's so many issues that come up that are just unnecessary. There's no reason to do it when there's such great options within the Frum community. Now, you're talking about graduate school. Graduate school is a little different. Torah's graduate I'm saying this is true of Yeshiva University, this is true of all of it. Aside from the Jewish graduate programs, like the ones in Jewish subjects, they're not necessarily Frum programs. So when it comes to graduate school, I would say just go for the program that could give you the best training for your field. I mean, that is what I would advise the student, because either way, I don't know. Either way, the environment is going to be one where, when it comes to graduate program, I would go with the program where you could get the best training. At that point, graduate program's a little different. Graduate school's a little different than undergrad in a few levels. First, students are older. The firm women who are going to these programs, they're a little bit older. They've been through seminary. They've done undergrad. They're a little older. They're a little more mature. Graduate programs are very vocationally focused, so you're not going to get the same onslaught of ideology that you would get in undergrad. And the population is usually older and more serious. There isn't the same kind of social elements. So, the biggest difference between, let's say, going to a graduate program sponsored by a firm college versus not is having Yontif off. So if that is important to you, to not be missing class on Yontif, then go with the program from the firm school. But for most of these graduate programs, even if it's run by a firm school, the population of the students isn't from. So I would, in that sense, just go for the program that makes the most sense educationally and in terms of training and in terms of money. I would figure all of that in. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
Does that make sense?
I think you answered that. Well, Dr. Klein, thank you very much for your time and your wisdom, and
thank you.
We have on the phone with us world-famous speaker Rabbi David Orlofsky, who engaged with both NCSY, or Sameach, formerly taught at Neve. He wrote for many years the Chinuch column in the Hamodia, a Talmud of Rabbi Tzvi Koshalevsky and others. Welcome, Reb Dovid.
Thank you very much.
So let me ask you a question. We're speaking today about the role of women. And here's a question. Most Haredi households, I have my own child that way, the husband learns and the wife works.
Yeah.
And my question is, what happened to two very important concepts? One is the woman historically has been the mother and the nourisher of the children, spiritually as well as physically. And today you have children that are brought up by daycare and babysitting services, etc. And part two of this question is, what happened to the concept of kol kfuda bas melech panima, which is, it's hard to make the argument that a woman who's going out into the workforce, most especially a secular workforce, is not going to be affected by what she sees, hears, etc., like Lashon Rambam is derech adam liyasnimshach achar svivav, etc. So the modern woman in today's world, when I say modern, I'm talking about very often the koil wife, as well as the two, the household that needs two, two providers. How does it deal with these conflicts? The Torah conflict about, your average nuclear family has one or two children. We, Kanai Nahara, don't have that. So children are very important. Al titush Torah simecha. But what happens when there is no Torah simecha because she's gone from 8 to 6? And what happens if she's in the secular workforce? How do we reconcile living a modern life today with the values that we've had for the last 3,500 years?
Well, you want the correct answer or the politically correct answer? I can give you both.
Let's have both.
I work both sides of the street. The politically correct answer is desperate times require desperate measures. And because Klal Yisroel was in danger of being destroyed, there was Rav Aaron Kotler. I'll tell you an interesting story. It's a fascinating anecdote. I don't know if it's true. I'm not Pesach Kron. I don't check out any of my stories. I hear something and I tell it over. I heard this story from somebody who's relatively reliable. It was an interesting story. This Rebbe says to Rav Matziel Solomon, the Mashgiach of the Liquid Yeshiva, he says, I hear that the Mashgiach doesn't travel on Route 9. Is that true? So he says, yeah, it's true. He says, how come? He said, because there are some stores there that are inappropriate and I don't feel comfortable driving past them. And the Rebbe says the Mashgiach is so sensitive to these matters, and he says, I try to be. And then the Rebbe says, and yet you let your boys go out on dates with girls unsupervised? Now, the answer that he gave, at least the way I heard it in the story, is interesting on two different levels. The first thing he says is, "You're right." Now that's fascinating that he says that, because the dating system that we have has become so incredibly enshrined that, again, nobody really stops to think whether or not it's the best way to do things or not. In the Jewish Observer, Oliver Shalom, there was a whole article on dating and shidduchim, and Rabbi Dr. Twersky wrote, he says, "I feel so bad for you, Litvish." He says, because you're expected to go out with a girl 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, and at the end of that process to develop a meaningful relationship. It takes years to develop a meaningful relationship. By the Hasidim, we don't even pretend. We understand that it takes years to develop a meaningful relationship, and the purpose of a shidduch is just to find 2 people where they have the reasonable possibility of developing that relationship. But you have to try to develop a real relationship. So we think that we have to go out on dates, and we go go-karting, and we play archery, we do all kinds of camp activities, and that shows us that this is a person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Okay, but the first thing he says is, "You're right." And then he said the following: When the Gedolim came to America after the war, they found a churban in Shabbos, a churban in Tznius, a churban in Kashrus, a churban in everything. And they were smart enough to know you can't fight on every front. And so they said, we're going to concentrate only on Torah. Concentrate on getting people to learn Torah. And that became the entire focus. That was they started Torah Umesorah. Everything they did was to build learning of Torah, and history has shown how incredibly successful it was. Because when I started school in 1964, it was a given that Orthodox Jewry was dead in America, and today everybody recognizes that it's the other movements that are dead, and that Orthodoxy is the only one that's going to survive. This took place because of the emphasis on Torah learning. Because of this, since it was a clarion call, all hands on deck, everybody has to sit and learn. So everybody was encouraged to sit in yeshiva, even, quite frankly, people who are not successful at it. And when I say not successful, I don't mean that they're brilliant. That's never been the yardstick. Not because they're not brilliant, because they're not fulfilled, because they're not enjoying it. I mean, you can find a lot of people who are sitting and learning full time who would rather be doing something else, but they can't because this is socially required. Because it's so important for everybody to learn in order to survive for Klal Yisrael. So therefore, we've created an unfortunate situation where even though the mama taka should be in the home and should be looking after the children, we have no choice, that they are moise nefesh, lifnei Mesiras Hadin, what they don't have to do to go out and support their family so their husband can sit and learn. That's the politically correct answer. The real answer is it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. And what's happening is we're losing a generation. That's what's happening. Because, it's an urban legend. I haven't checked this out, but I've heard it, and I don't mind saying it over without any evidence whatsoever. But I've heard it more than once, that a kid starts in school, and his first language is Spanish. He's been brought up by the babysitter or the cleaning lady who comes from a South American or a Central American country, and parents don't have enough time for their kids. The fact is that we are technologically more advanced than we've ever been. I mean, If you understand what something as simple as laundry was 200 years ago, take the water from the well and fill it up and then boil it and then boil the clothes and then wring them out, rub them on a wash basin and then wring them out, and then and then you had to heat up the iron on the stove and then iron them, and all this kind of stuff that went on to it. Today, it's such a simple thing. Everything is so easy. My kids, I live in Eretz, we're a little bit behind, but my kids When I go to America, they think they laugh their heads off. They think it's the funniest thing. You can walk into one of these kosher supermarkets. I'm not going to mention any by name. I use one that I'm more familiar with than others from where I lived in America. But, they buy a tray with cookies already on them. And you take this tray of cookies and you put it in the oven. And today that's called baking cookies. You walk into a store and there's a bag with all of the vegetables for your vegetable soup all cut up, and a little bag of spices. It's embarrassing that they don't provide the water. And you pour it in a pot, you add the water, and I made vegetable soup. Now this is already called home cooking. You understand? The people who somebody told me they took a Shalom Bayis course in Flatbush, and they said that on Friday night you should compliment your wife on the takeout place that she bought from. So we're more technologically advanced. We have more things than we've ever had, and people have no time. People have no time, and I don't know if you saw that heartbreaking Avisu Bunim video where this kid wants to buy a half an hour of his father's time to sit and speak to him. We have no time. We have no time. We have more opportunities and less time than ever. And usually people grew up and there was a parent in the house. So we're paying a terrible thing on this. And I have to tell you, I've met women who tell me that even if it's not financially essential, I'll go out of my mind if I have to stay home with my kids.
Orlofsky, here's a quote, okay, from the New York Times. Today's generation is different than any generation that preceded it. Children are disrespectful. I used to listen to my father. I used to listen to my mother. Today, we do what we want. We behave as we want. What has happened to today's generation that has caused so much decay in our moral character? That's the New York Times. New York Times, 1895. So I don't buy into today's generation is worse. The Amolaga, Shamim, you know what I mean? Darton over there is, Loiba Shamayim, it's the last generation. I think today's generation works and is more productive than any other generation. I think if you go out into the world, look at the price of a pound of bread compared to a generation ago. We accomplish much more. We do much more. We're the most educated generation. I don't buy into our generation is worse. And I think productivity of our generation proves it. The poverty of the world at large is the least it's ever been. And yes, are people working? Do people find it hard to make Pesach? Yes. You know why? Because they're being so productive. So I don't see that as a negative.
Nice
I see that as a positive.
I hear what you're saying. Well, when you say more productive, I'm telling you that they spend less time doing anything.
Well, how do you
when you go to an office and you sit at a computer and you type in information, how do you compare that? My father grew up in the Depression, all right? He dropped out of school after 9th grade because there was no food. He went to work, pulled himself up by his bootstraps, built himself a business, got married, had 6 sons, moved out to the suburbs, sacrificed to get them a Jewish education, sacrificed to be able to raise his kids, send them to school, buy the cars, etc., because that's what you're supposed to do. I never heard my father feel sorry for himself. My mother told me when he went bankrupt, so he had a week where he just sat at home. He couldn't go to work. And my mother said, you got children. You got to support them. I'll go to work with you. So she took him to work so that he would go to work because he was depressed because he lost everything and he had to start all over again.
So Rabbi Orlofsky, the last generation was all heroes, and today's generation is a bunch of losers and whiners.
They're definitely a bunch of whiners. I don't know if they're losers, but they're definitely a bunch of whiners.
So today's generation whines more than any generation that preceded it.
Right, because our generation, I'll tell you why. And it's the fault of my parents' generation.
You're saying why?
And our generation.
I don't agree with the premise at all, by the way.
I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'll tell you my thought.
The good old days.
I gotcha. Let me explain to you what I mean, okay? I blame my parents' generation and my generation. My parents' generation, because they had such a hard time, wanted to give their children everything. I don't want my children to have to worry. Because of that, my generation never grew up. We're a bunch of oversized children, and we don't know what it means to grow up. Yeah? So my father told me once what a wild and crazy guy my grandfather was. One time he took a kid's bicycle and he rode down the street. So I said, I see people go to Koil on bicycles because you don't understand. An adult never did that. An adult, wore a hat, a guy wore a hat and a jacket, often a tie when he walked down the street. If he went to work, he put on his work clothes and then he dressed it quickly. It was a sense of respect, how a person walks down the street. Today, when I used to teach seminary, I'd have a mother come with her daughter, her seminary student. They would sit in class, and they were dressed exactly the same jean skirt, the same sneakers, the same, both chewing the gum.
Rabbi Orlofsky, it's hard to respond to who's chewing gum, but let's look at the facts, okay? There are more yeshivas in America than have ever, to my knowledge, been in the history of Klal Yisrael and Gullus. There are more
producing less gedolim than ever before.
More yeshivas, more Beis Yaakovs. There are more. The Orthodox community is wealthier, more established, has more chesed. It's the most successful Jewish community in history, even though it's a bunch of whiners and losers. I mean, it just doesn't add up.
No, you keep adding in losers. I didn't say losers. I did say whiners.
Because there are a bunch of whiners who grew up with silver spoons in their mouth. They're spoiled. Spoiled means non-producers usually. So they're spoiled guys who want to go away for Pesach, and it's created the most B'nai Torah probably since the time of the Gemara, the most learned group of people. There are more Talmidei Chachamim in Lakewood today. There are guys who can write on all of Shas. There are more people in Koil. Look, in Litta, they had a dozen people in Koil. Today, there's 1,000 times that in Chutz Laretz, right? So it's the most
because Balabas used to work.
Wait, it's the most successful group of people we've ever had in Ruchnius or in Gashmias since our memory, since the time of Chizkiah, right? And this is by a group of whiners and spoiled kids. So, my suggestion is, let's spoil kids more and make them whine more, because it certainly is leading to great success.
What can I tell you? You and I define success in different ways. That's all I can tell you.
But let's go back to mothers and children.
The fact that there are more people sitting and learning today is not producing better Torah. Yeah,
How do you know that?
Are there more people?
I strongly disagree with that. I learn a substantial amount of time, and I can tell you that the Sfarim that are coming out today are at a par that it's preceded anything. There were great Gegonim like Reb Kivega and Cham Seifert, which are always very unique. But as a whole, it's the most learned crowd we've ever seen in history.
I'm thinking about people who got up at sunrise and worked till sunset, manual labor out in the field, not on a computer. And then they came home physically exhausted, and they sat the entire night in the beis medrash. That was not unusual. That was the norm. So that the city of Kelm, where everybody worked, the entire city made a siyum shas. They used to sit and learn. So that my point about whether or not you're on a computer or not is, of course, totally irrelevant. My point is people would sit and people would work very hard, and then they sat in the beis medrash. Ralph Weinberg tells about his father, who was a businessman, that he would come home at night, and he says, I never saw him sleep in a bed. He would work all day, and then he fell asleep at the table because he was sitting and learning.
Okay, let me just respond. I don't know who his father was, and I don't know what happened in Kelm, but I do know the following. In Lithuania, in the Litta, 90% were irreligious, right? So all these people who were sitting and learning, and it was so customary, all their kids were irreligious. Rabbi Yankiv was one of 7, the other 6 were religious. Rabbi Aaron's sibling was irreligious. You go through all the Litta was 90%. So whatever they were doing there, all these, like when I see these painting, how, it was so beautiful in the Haim, 50% of Poland was irreligious. How many children are we losing today? What is it, 1% of the population, 2%,
right,
as opposed to 50 or 90? So I just don't buy into these magical stories, because the facts don't hold out. It's just not true.
I understand. But if you want to play this game, what percentage of Klal Yisrael today is irreligious?
But what does it have to do with it? We're talking about what are we losing?
Because what you're doing is you're pulling out all of Jewry. That's what you're saying. You say, look at Lithuania, 90% of them were not religious. Look at America, 90% of them were not religious. So you say, well, that's different. Why is that different?
Because listen,
you have a machla. There's a machla in Klal Yisrael that's taken place since the Haskalah. It didn't start in our generation. It didn't start today. It's been going on for a very long time.
But
I agree with you. It's a terrible thing that people are not from.
The Haskalah is 150 to 200 years old. Preceding the Haskalah, it was 100% from just about. And it went over a 150-year period, or from 100% to 90% fry. So whatever they were doing really, really wasn't working. And whatever we're doing today really, really is working. So I think today's generation and the way we're running things both in America and in Eretz Yisrael should be applauded, and we should be patting ourselves on the back.
Terrific.
I'm not a believer in Tovim Hayu Ayamama. I think we're doing the best job that we've ever seen in Jewish history.
Wonderful.
But let's go back to our topic, which was women.
We don't have any problems.
But what is the issue?
I'm so happy. You just solved all the problems.
I'm just telling you.
There are problems in the Jewish community, and there aren't any. Baruch Hashem.
There are many other problems. But the problem
No, there are no problems. Everybody's sitting and learning. Everyone's satisfied. Everyone's more spiritual. Nobody's going off the derech. It's such a wonderful thing. Mamash Klal Yisrael is the greatest it's ever been. That's what you're telling me.
So this is why
Hashem. I don't know why. I don't know how the Mishpacha stays in business. They keep writing, and the Ami and all these other newspapers. They keep writing about all the problems in society. But according to you, there are no problems. Everything is gewaldic. Everything is better than it's ever been in history.
Rabbi,
I don't even know why anybody's complaining. Baruch Hashem, things are great.
So let's go through that litany, okay?
You remember, you can't do it both. You can't have a podcast where you discuss the problems in society and then tell me everything is better than it's ever been. You're going to have to choose one of those two.
Rabbi Orlofsky, I disagree.
You can't write for the Ami and then tell me that everything is great, because those two just don't work.
Rabbi Orlofsky, I think that they used to lose 90% or 50% left. Today we're losing practically nobody. It's low single digits, right? 5%, 3%, right? I think that so from a spiritual point of view, I think yes, and from a financial, as a society, as a structure, we're doing great. Are there still problems? Yes, there are still real problems. Why do we have suicide, even though it's 2 or 3%? Why do we have molestation? Why do we have shidduchim issues? Every society will always have problems, but our marker of where problems is far, the bar is far higher than it's ever been. There's no hunger in our community. Disease, we have medicine. We're not being discriminated against. We have law. We have parnasa. We have fantastic yeshivas. We have real Talmidei Chachamim. The bar is much higher. Does that mean there are no problems? Why is 3 or 4% leaving? What about all the single girls who don't have shidduchim? So there are problems.
So, right.
But it's much better than it's ever been. Poverty,
I got you.
been almost eradicated.
I understand what you're saying. You like the first answer much better than the second answer. The answer is, politically correct, everything is going great, and, unfortunately this is a necessary sacrifice that mothers have to make in order to leave their families so that we can have the best generation that Klal Yisrael has ever had with the most learning, and everything is terrific, and Baruch Hashem. Okay, I hear it. You're not the first person who said this, and I definitely hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it and respect it.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. We have the right to disagree on that, right? Well, let me ask you a question. What's your opinion working in a secular environment? Your daughter has a choice of one of two things. She can become a teacher and struggle to find a job, or on the other hand, either struggle to find a job and probably a low-paying job. But it's in a safe environment. It's in a Beis Yaakov, et cetera. Or you could teach her, I don't know, she can become an OP, occupational therapist, OT, PT, speech. Some of those she can find in a good environment. Or she could become an attorney, in which case she's going to work in a really very secular environment, but earn a real living and support her husband. That is a crossroads and a crisis that many smart girls have today. How would you respond to that as a mechanech?
There was this major story that took place years ago when there was a Supreme Court justice that they were trying to approve. And this woman came out with all kinds of questions or accusations against him that he was doing things and saying things that were inappropriate to the women employees. And at the time, this idea of, harassment in the workplace became a major story. And a lot of husbands who were learning and their wives were working asked their wives, did anything like this ever happen to you? And they all said, of course. This kind of thing happens every single day. So I had a wife who called me up once and said to me, I can't handle it. It's mamish, I can't handle it. The schmutz in the office, the conversations, the way people behave, what's going on, is taking a toll on me spiritually. And I spoke to my husband about it because it's a good job. And his Rosh Hashiva told him, she's making a lot of money, that's what's important. And she's a woman, it's not such a big deal for her. And, so she'll come home at night and, read the Seminary or whatever, and she'll be fine, And she says, that's what my husband's Rosh Hashiva says. So I said, well, I'm certainly not going to get involved in your shalom bias. If that's what you hold, and that's what your husband holds, kol hakavod. So to my mind, it's really a question of values. It's a question of which values are the most important to a family. So when a person asks me, right? So I look at it from a different point of view. I look at it as the reason we're in this world is for our ruchnius. That's why Kodesh Baruch Hu put us into this world. That's why Kodesh Baruch Hu created us, and that's the most important thing that we have to take into account. But clearly, not everybody feels that way. So,
let me follow up, Rabbi Orlofsky. I respect and I agree with what you're saying. So now let me have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Now you have a Rebbe. He's offered a job in Kiruv. Like I think a lot of what you did was NCSY, right? Well, he comes home and he tells his wife, guess what? It's the summer. I did a project. I took 50 kids to Israel for a trip, and it was 25 boys and 25 girls, and the girls were dressed in a way, let's just say, we'll call it Silsa Maruba Michamsa, and it's affecting my Yerusha Shemayim, but on the other hand, I'm being makar of 25 children to Yiddishkeit. How would you respond to that?
Get out. Run for the hills.
Or a Chabad Shliach, for that matter. And I've been to many of really remote locations. When you travel, you have a remote in Hong Kong or China or Japan, and they're bringing up children in a totally secular environment. It's a family.
That's different. That's different. You just mixed two questions.
Okay.
One is you're saying to me, I'm putting myself in a situation where I'm being exposed to things that I believe are making an impact on my neshama. So I've worked in Torah for many years, and I always have a chiddush that I say over that I heard years ago. There's a God. He runs the world, not you. And you don't have to be smarter than God. And if a Kodesh Baruch Hu says that something is usher, even though you decided he got it wrong, and you understand better, and you're going to, do a better job than he did, if he says that this is usher, this is usher. If you're talking about, I'm going to go and work in from yeshiva where everything is kosher v'yosher, aber I'm in Yenemsveld and I'm worried about my kids. Okay, so that there's a haftacha that the Chofetz Chaim gave years ago that if you go into Chinuch out of town, that Kodesh Baruch Hu will watch your kids. I learned the Chofetz Chaim, which held as a very important value to being able to educate and help Klal Yisrael and help Yiddish Kinderlach, that you won't suffer because of that. That's a different question. But to put myself in a situation, listen, look, we've already established that I'm a heretic, but, to me, I've seen people in the field who've gotten messed up because of what they've been exposed to. And it's not pretty. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So when a person says to me, I'm prepared to die for the cause, I get very nervous. I get nervous because I've seen people who have gone down that route, and I've seen them pay a price. So if you tell me, there is no price to pay, it's everything's gewalt, it's okay, terrific. But, if you tell me that a person's going to put himself in a morally hazardous situation for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my feeling is that cannot be Ratzon Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not want you to sacrifice your Shemayim in order to be able to go and help other people. Now, there are some people, based on their background, where it doesn't affect them. I know this for a fact. You know, you mentioned that I was in NCSY. That's true. I grew up in a co-ed high school. You know, I came from a family that was not Shomer Shabbos. You know, so I came from a different background than the average guy. But I was encouraged by my Rosh Yeshiva and Chavetz Chaim to run NCSY. But whenever I wanted to ask guys from the yeshiva to be advisors, he wouldn't let me take them. So I said, Rabbi, if I don't have any advisors, I can't do my job. He says, yeah. I said, and I have to have advisors who are B'nai Torah. He said, no, of course. I said, but you won't let any of the boys come? He says, yeah, it's a problem. So it took me a while to figure out what I think he was trying to tell me. And what I think he was trying to tell me was that, you know, you have to find people who are effective but are not, you know, going to be affected based on where they come from. So is that easy to do? No, it's not easy to do. Are there people based on their background who can handle it? Yeah. And there are people who can't handle it. So if a person says to me, I'm being affected negatively by my exposure to women who are dressed inappropriately, and my mechal used to do this, I got to tell them no. Yeah. I can't believe that's Ratzon Hashem.
And which would be the same thing for a woman then in the workplace, working in an environment that she feels is acerbic to her beliefs. You would say
so that's why I told the story where this Rosh Yeshiva said to his Talmud, it's different for a girl.
And you obviously disagree, and I disagree too. I think it's just common sense.
Well, listen, you know, I'm the first one to say I'm not a das Torah.
Yeah, but what happened?
Nobody should look to me for guidance in life.
But kol kfuda bas melech panima, notwithstanding, I mean, it's a machlekes whether we do paskin like that or we don't paskin like that. But when it reaches a point where a woman says it's negatively affecting her emunah, her betachin, her yer shemayim, we have a Marie Bruna, we have paiskim that say very clearly that in such a case where a girl has to work in such an environment that it's asa. So if you would send me the Rosh Yeshiva's name, I'll send him the copy of the tshuva from the Marie Bruna. I'll send him which we'll post online, by the way. We'll post online. The Marie Bruna was asked. A girl had to work in houses of Nachrim, and he said absolutely she doesn't have to. And even though we paskin, we don't paskin kol kfuda bas pelach panima. He brings other makayros why we don't have to, and he's a kadman, the earliest achreinim. Rabbi Orlofsky, thank you very much. Go ahead. I just want to say it's particularly ironic because of the education we provide our girls in the Beis Yaakov of how everything is asa. And they have to stay far away from everything, and they can't be exposed to anything. And then we have no problem sending them out. That same issue of the Jewish Observer that I mentioned about dating. So this guy wrote in and said, why is it, he says, that when I'm in yeshiva, I am told that if I go to certain places, I'm going to be thrown out of yeshiva. And once I start shidduchim, they encourage me to take a girl to these places to be able to go out on the date. How is it suddenly that not only these places mutter, but I'm being advised by my Rabbi, oh yeah, go to this place, go to that place. If I had gone there, the Bach, you would have thrown me out of yeshiva. So I say the same thing about a Beis Yaakov, that if we're bringing up our girls that these things are unacceptable, then I don't understand how all of a sudden now it is acceptable. So it's a great kasha you're asking. Rabbi Orlofsky, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Atzlacha.
Kulta. Bye-bye. Bye. We have on the phone with us from New York City, Rabbi Shmuel Yaakov Klein. He's a machanech with over 40 years' experience. He's director of Torah Umesorah, director of Zichur Yomai Solam. He's a musmach of Hagoyin Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg Zetzel, and he's a Talmud of his. He's a writer, written many books. If you go online, you'll see many books he's written. He's also a Gerach Chassid. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Klein.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Klein, seminaries in Israel, they cost, I don't know, I was told it costs the father between $35,000 and $40,000 to send a child there when you're finished with tuition and tickets and spending money, etc. And that's a lot of money for most people. I mean, post-taxes, because it's not tax deductible in New York City anyway, $35,000 becomes $70,000 of gross earnings. That's to send one kid to seminary. And can I know many of our families are bruchos yeladim. And the question is it really worth it? I mean, should parents take out a second mortgage? Should they go into debt? For the honor of their children, touring Mei Yesharim or wherever it may be. What do you say? There are wonderful schools here in America. Don't go into debt. Teach your children the value of living responsibility. What would be the Rav's opinion?
Probably a controversial one, I think. When it came to my own daughters, so personally, I kept them in a local seminary. I was living in Toronto at the time. So we sent them to the Beis Yaakov Seminary, the post-high school seminary, locally. My feeling is that it is a tremendous amount of money. My feeling is it is a tremendous hardship for a lot of people. At the same time, for those who are sworn Hasidim of that approach, they say it's a life-changing experience for their daughters, and I guess they say it's worth the money. Additional downside might be that in many seminaries, the girls are really on their own when it comes to Shabbos or Yom Tovim. Additionally, they maybe have a little bit too much time on their hands, and I wouldn't say roaming the streets, that would be harsh, but they're left to their own resources a little bit too much, so that could be a little bit of an obstacle in their unilateral spiritual growth. But again, it's a hard thing to paskin. I would only reiterate that for my own self, I felt that was not the approach that I wanted to take with my kids, with no regrets. And on the other hand, for many people, it is, as I said, a life-changing experience for their daughters, and they feel that it's worth the money, despite the hardship. So it's a tough call.
Now, did you feel for shidduchim it was a setback for girls who don't go? I mean, you said you had a number of children, and they said, "Oh my goodness, she didn't go to seminary." It's sort of like you didn't learn in Lakewood. Like, how would you rate that?
Again, so I have to dichotomize between my own personal experience between what I know to be the experience of other people. So for my own self, insofar as all of my shidduchim or Hasidic shidduchim from the Ger community, one an Israeli Ger shidduch, but the rest from the United States, from New York. So there was never really an obstacle because that wisdom, or that so-called wisdom that I felt and that I applied to my own kids, is pretty conventional here among other people from the same community. So nobody even asked what seminary did they go to. That's a non-issue. Most of I would say the vast majority of the Ger girls, when they graduate high school, so most go to some sort of a seminary situation here, whether it's full day, half day. Many don't. Some get married earlier. Some go to work after high school. But the Israeli route is not something which is seen as choik v'layavor in any way. For other people, if that is part of the let us say the profile of what happens with the shidduchim, then certainly that would add another reason for people to go along with the seminary idea, despite all of the obstacles. It's something they have to do in order to safeguard a good shidduch for their daughters. Whether that's a good system ideally or philosophically or not is, of course, the debate at hand. But I would say that it is, if it's a reality, it's a difficult reality for many people to contend with.
Let me ask you a more general question. As a mechanach, what should we be teaching our daughters? The Shulchan Aruch says even Torah shebiksav is a b'diavad. Torah shebal peh, the Shulchan Aruch says is kilum lamda tiflis. So, should we be educating our children in Chumash, Ramban, Pirkei Avos, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and some places learn even more. They learn Mishnah with the girls. They learn Kuzari, etc. Or should we have a more simplified, dumbed down type of chinuch, more in line, actually, of what the Shulchan Aruch recommends? Which, by the way, which we had for thousands of years. Our Babas learned Seminary, right? So, what's your opinion?
So it's a multifaceted question. First of all, I wouldn't equate Mishnah with Kuzari. By the way, that's just a side point before we get into it. But Tiflis is indeed for Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebiksav is a little bit better than B'diavad. Certainly, we are. It is recommended that we move with the times, and this was borne out by Sarah Schneur. What she created was a revolution, and it received the approval of such Gedal Yisroel as, in fact, the Imramis, the Ger Rebbe, and Rav Chaim Oizer and others who the Chavetzaim, and this became the standard. So if one would compare that which became conventional according to Das Torah in the early 20th century with what preceded it, then it would constitute a revolution. Now, what should be actually being taught? Well, you should know that the halacha is, of course, that a woman makes the bracha of Lasag B'divrei Torah every morning. She should, and that's because the Mefarshim, the Magen Avraham, and others explain, because they have a connection to those halachas which are negea to them. So women do have an actual connection to Limud Torah, although it's not the intrinsic mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Now, all that being said, I would add to that an important component, and that is insofar as the women today are so integral and so crucial in building the atmosphere of a home, and the atmosphere in which children are being raised, and insofar as they really should be having an impact on the respect that their children have for academics, for learning, and the years are covered for learning in general, it is important that women get training in more than Tzenerena. Again, this is today's wisdom, today's reality. The Kotz Rebbe once said, Binu Shnois Dor Vador, that we should, Shnois means also change. We should understand, Binu, the Shnois, the change that happens from generation to generation. And in our world today, we can't go according to the standards of once upon a time. It does not work. It's dangerous to assume that would work. So again, if women learn enough so that they have respect for learning, where academics is a crucial feature and component in their lives, then I think that it's a tova to the children that they're raising. So if it's a Ramban, or whether it's Pirkei Avos, or whether it's even a Kuzri, whatever, the curriculum, of course, is the choice and the decision of each moisid and each kehillah. But I definitely would lean towards the notion that there should be strong learning, even among girls, in our day and age. Yes.
Now, there are achrayim, and later this whole issue is a relatively new issue, because you say until Sarah Schneur there were no girls' schools. But so if you look at the late achrayim of the last 100 years, such as the Divrei Yatziv and the Shevet Levi, etc., they say a girl shouldn't be learning Ramban. Ramban is not Torah Shebiksav. It's already Torah Shebal Peh. It's about understanding it's Divrei Chazal, which is obviously all Torah Shebal Peh. So if you're advocating learning Ramban, which is quite commonly accepted today in most girls' seminaries or high schools, how do you feel about those that want to teach girls Mishnayos or Gemara, for that matter? Like, if they're teaching them Ramban, it's not much of a halachic difference between Ramban and Chumash and Gemara. So how would you differentiate, and if so, why and how?
Well, obviously, we're not talking about Ramban al Shas, which would mean that you're not absolutely right. But Ramban al Torah really is just a pirush of the actual mikra. Now, Mishnah is Torah Shebal Peh Mamish. When you learn
Ramban al Chumash, he'll say, Chazal said like this about this. We darshan is this. Azev tazevimai einel lefi kfaydim. This is all in the Ramban. So it's basically he's importing the Gemara, right, and using Divrei Chazal to explain things in the pasuk, that's what Torah Shebal Peh is. I mean,
what would you say about Rashi? Rashi also cites Chazal.
I would say the same.
Chazal.
I would say the same thing. The Rashis that go beyond the actual, just simple Pirush HaMikra. I mean, the Ramban is much more lengthy, and he'll bring in, many halachas that we learn from the Ramban al Torah. He argues very often on the Rambam al Torah, etc. So it's just, it's sort of, you would say, it's Torah Shebal Peh Rashi on steroids. But those Rashis would be the same thing. If it goes beyond the immediate Pirush, the Kleisenberger, the Rabbi, and I'm saying the Shevet Levi, and many, other poskim, sort of contemporary, because it's only a contemporary issue. We can't go further back. So why not teach them Mishnayos itself then?
Well, insofar as you say there may be a machlokes of more or less contemporary poskim, then it's the decision of each kehillah to follow the Das Torah that guides that particular kehillah. So if you're learning in let's say, if a girl's learning in a Satmar kind of a Beis Yaakov, then they won't learn Rashi. But in many Chassidisim, including Ger and others, they would learn Rashi. So it depends on the Umesorah. Now it's hard to speak about Umesorah when it comes to Chinuch Habanos because it isn't that old, really. As we said, it's just a century and a bit. Oh, you're right. So there isn't a lengthy Umesorah. But insofar as, again, each Kehillah will have defined its own mahalach and what to teach to girls, then it's not a question for the individual or for one commentator or another commentator or a guest on some sort of a show to express a view. There is the Umesorah of that Kehillah. Again, personally, I would think that the majority of the world in Chinuch Habanos, including many Chassidish Kehillas and most, if not all, Litvish Kehillas, do hold that Chumash and Rashi, and not skipping Rashis, which bring down Chazal, which is the majority of Rashis, but every Rashi is part of the Torah Shebiksav kind of equation, and by that, by that virtue, I guess Ramban could also, and other Meforshei Torah could also be taught, and that wouldn't encroach on the traditional Torah Shebal Peh. When we think about Torah Shebal Peh, we're thinking classically about, of course, Mishnayos and Gemara. So even there are those, perhaps in the more modern side of the spectrum, who think that even that may be acceptable. But again, the conventional wisdom of most Kehillas, if not all the Haredish Kehillas, is that is not, because that is classically a Torah Shebal Peh. But again, when we said earlier that girls need to learn halacha, they may be privy to a machlokes in the Mishnah between, or in the Gemara, or in later poskim, between the various shittas and halacha. And when girls learn the halacha, it would be, in my opinion, permissible for them to know that there is that machlokes and what we poskin like, and perhaps why, or whatever the case is. Those are all within the genre of what is acceptable for Chinuch Habanos, according to the view of most. Again, this doesn't account for everybody's view. Very few things in life, except for the Yisroel that we believe.
But Rabbi Klein, it is a question though. Like if Ramban brings down a Gemara, right? It is again. It's just Torah Shebal Peh that's being quoted by a Ramban or by a Rashi.
So that's not learning. That's not learning Gemara. That's being privy to a citation that somebody makes from a Gemara. That's
right. But if somebody,
I would say, and as I said, Rashi also brings down. Most of Rashi brings down Chazal, and that, to my knowledge, has never been viewed as something which goes beyond the pale of what Chinuch Habanos should include. Again, except for the exception of those few kehillas that hold that they shouldn't be learning Rashi, and for Sheitzach, not Ramban. But with the exception of those, most of the world teaches girls Rashi, and Rashi includes Chazal.
By the way, here's an interesting Aznayim L'Torah. Zalman Sorotskin was an Adam Gadol, and I found a similar thought by Rav Moshe Sternbruch in his Shuvas Hanhagas. He says on the pasuk, "Mikedem lebeiskel by Yavoy Oyhela." The Chazal the Medrash brings that he was masakin a place to teach women. So Reb Zalman Sorotskin says, you see that he was masakin for women before men. So the Rav Moshe Sternbuch in his Shuvas Hanhagas Paskins, he was asked whether a community, they should build a boys' school or a girls' school, which one comes first? And he says, based on this Chazal, he says, build the girls' schools first, which I find to be pretty fascinating. Like when we talk about Chinuch Habanos sort of like as a stepchild that Sarah Shadira invented, and yet we have here, he is the Gaivid, and Reb Zalman Sorotskin was not a gadol. I say a question: boys' school or girls' school? Build the girls' schools first. I'm curious, as a Gerach Chassid, how would you feel about that?
I wouldn't be shocked, or I don't find that objectionable in any way whatsoever. I'll add to that. You know what? I'll add to that a Marsho, the Marsho and Soita, the Gemara that you cited without the Makor earlier about Tiflus, that's Gemara and Soita, that you're not allowed to teach your daughter Torah. On that Gemara, I think it's Soita Daf Chof, if I'm not mistaken. So the Marsho brings down a pasuk, the famous pasuk of Chinuch Habanos, so the Maalot says that the classic understanding of that pasuk is that the second half, V'sageh l'bnei Yisroel, means, and you, Moshe, shall tell kosher kagidin, you should do the Haggadah to bnei Yisroel, which is the men, and the earlier part is to the women. So even from that simple pshat of the pasuk, it would seem that maybe rather, Elo Hanoshim precedes the other one, so maybe that would bear out what you said. But even more, the Marsho says a fascinating pshat that the word Visaged, in Diktuk, we know that in the future tense of verbs, the Noicheach, which is the Atoa form, is the exact same form as the Nisteres, which is the he. So Visaged, instead of meaning, and you, Moshe, shall tell the men, it means Visaged, and she, the woman, should tell the men or men in her life. So the pshat of the posuk is now Hashem is ordering Moshe Rabbeinu speak first to the women, Visaged, and she will then be the mashpia with the essential messages of Mamlechus Koyhana v'Goy Kodesh, etc. She will be the mashpia on her son, on her husband, on her brother, on her father. So that certainly adheres, conforms with what you quoted from the Lutzkerov and from the Rosh Sternbuch, the guy. So, I don't find that startling at all.
So that leads into the next question, Rabbi Klein. Our girls, what do we expect of them? Are they supposed to be, should they be supporting their husbands, which often requires some type of secular education, in other words, OT, PT, accounting, etc., or should they be home? What's the job of a Bas Yisrael?
Again, I'd say, and first of all, it really is a shayla for Gedolei Yisrael, and I'm flattered to being asked a question that would really fall into that shetach. Nevertheless, I have to reiterate that that's really something for the guidance of Gedolei Yisrael. But for mine own part, I would say that it depends also on the culture of the kehillah. So if the concept of a husband learning in koil, despite whatever the hardships might be, is sacrosanct, then obviously would fall into the Rishus HaYochid of the wife to do her part in supporting that financially. In other times, other cultures, other venues, that may not have been the case. So today, I think the concept of the koil is something which arguably saves the day for Klal Yisrael. It was, whether you can call it a Hiroas Shah or not, there are those who did, but certainly the Chazanish, Zechat Rabbi and Rabbi Kotler here, when they were mechazik this idea of koil, they did something for the reparation and the safeguarding of the integrity of Klal Yisrael. So, somebody has to pay the bills. So if it's possible, for the wife to work and to help, or even take the lion's share of the financial burden, then that would be great if that's possible.
So do you think then that a secular education of OT, PT, finance, or the many courses that Torah and many other schools go, you think that is appropriate given the fact that koil today has become, like you say, sacrosanct?
So if a girl or a girl's parents ask Das Torah, they ask for a heter, and the answer is affirmative, and if the venue in which the girl is going to learn is basically predicated on there being kedusha, which means not a mixed oilam and not a secular-minded oilam, then it could be certainly a possibility. A blanket door being open to all girls to going to whatever secondary or post-secondary academic institution in order to pursue some sort of a career, certainly I could never say that or subscribe to that at all.
So, Rabbi Klein,
yeah.
We know that it's well accepted, the concept of kol kvoda bas melech pnima. I mean, to the point where the Rambam says that a woman shouldn't leave her house, right? The Ramah actually brings it in Tur and Sinai and Gimel. He brings ein yoifi leisha elo leisha b'zaviz beisa, and it's based, according to many Achrayim, on the concept of kol kvoda bas melech pnima. How do we balance the concept of kol kvoda bas melech pnima and its many halachic ramifications with now the wife is suddenly out there 9 to 5 earning a living in the big scary world?
So again, I don't want to appear to be giving a cop-out kind of an answer, but it depends on the individual, depends on the culture of the kehillah, it depends on the Das Torah that is given the guidance to pursue that kind of a thing. In today's world, kol kvoda bas melech pnima means that within the venue where the woman finds herself, there has to be that midah of kol kvoda bas melech pnima. It doesn't necessarily mean today that a woman has to be literally, as in what you just quoted, the Zavis Besa, etc., etc. I mean, that we can go back to Hine Ba'oyel, Tzenua, she was in the oil. But somehow Sarah Imenu was a powerhouse. She was Mekareves as Hanoshim. There are those who say that the Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Yeholim, the oil was the credit of the oil that she built up. So somehow what she was able to do is to create a powerhouse of a mashpia while being tznuah. So today the venues have changed a little bit. A woman might be in an office, might be in some other form of a workplace, whatever it is. The Kvuda Bas Melech becomes the oifen in which she conducts herself in whatever the venue is. But
so
again,
the concept of would you say then that the concept of Ba'ihil then in our times has basically been, we've waived that, we've remitted that?
We've tempered it with the time and the needs of the time. As I said, Sarah Schneur did not conduct her business from her house. Maybe it started. Maybe she had a group of girls meeting in her home. That's a possibility, if my memory serves me correct. And,
Rabbi Klein, we mentioned before, and you that the importance of the woman, the girls' school coming before the boys' school, like you said, from the Lutzkerov and from others, and the understanding that the home is the Ishtay Zubeisa, it's the cocoon, it's where the Yiddish Kinder are mechonach. And the mother, Altitesh Tyresi Mecha, is often the one who transmits the chinuch to the children and invariably used to spend much more time bringing up the children. On the other hand, we said that today women do go out to work because Kol is sacrosanct, and also the recognition that many homes need double-age earners. So the question is, what happened to the job of that mother as the nourisher, nurturer of the children, which was so important to the point that we established a girls' school first, and now the child is being brought up by a babysitter, by some type of a daycare. I know parents have told me that their children's first words are in Spanish. What happened? We as much as we say, look, maybe Kol is sacrosanct, but isn't bringing up Jewish children as sacrosanct, and isn't that sort of a violation of the very essence of the job of the mother? So on one hand, we're advocating sending them to school to learn a malacha, kala, nakia that they should be able to. On the other hand, we're saying, wait, teach them because they're the ones who nourish the children. Well, which way is it?
First of all, I've been privy to a lot of these kinds of jokes and urban myths, we might even call them, about first words being in Spanish. Those are humorous things. I don't know if it's really part of the reality. Now, I will share my personal experience, and that is that my wife, Zolga Zintzine, she taught. She was a teacher as long as we were living in Toronto. For 32 years, she was teaching, albeit not full day, but by the time she came home, let's say 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, whatever the case might be, I don't think there's an iota in which I would say that my wife failed to fulfill the classic role of a mother being a mechaneches and chachmas noshim bonzabeso, and setting the tone and the environment of the household. And I think
but Rabbi Klein, if a woman's works 9 to 2 or 9 to 1, yes, the kids, they're going to see their parents most of the day. But most of the other jobs that women take, a part-time job is not going to support a husband for the most part, certainly learning, etc., or be meaningful. A teacher's salary, whatever it is not a meaningful addition to the house. Once you go into these other fields, be it accounting, be it one of the medical fields, nurse practitioner, OT, PT, speech, these are 9 to 5 jobs, and a 9 to 5 job means you leave at 8:30 and you get home at 5:30 or 6. That's a very different ball of wax.
Yes, it is, and I know there are many instances where the chinuch of the children in that family may have suffered as a result. But again, one doesn't create a policy, a pervasive policy for all Jews to follow based on the fact that there are some weaknesses in some places and in some situations. I would say overall, I would say that it's probably safe to assume that Jewish mothers, frum mothers, do not relegate their responsibilities in a big way or in a significant way, and that they are being mechanech their children. I would say, I would agree with you on one thing, and that is that if a mother sees that she's not able to do that, then she really has to revisit what she's doing. Maybe she has to alter her schedule or alter her lifestyle altogether. It can be a problem. Each case is different. Each situation is different. Where the problem can be perceived as existing, then I agree with you. There has to be somebody to take a look at that, and maybe we have to modify what we're doing in that particular family. Yes, I agree that there are cases where parents failed. As a Menahel, I saw this, I wouldn't say countless times, that would be false. But I saw it in several instances where, because of these kinds of circumstances, mothers or fathers did not really fulfill the responsibility adequately, and it showed up in their kids. But I wouldn't say that it's a pervasive problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem which affects a significant chelik of Klal Yisrael. But to the extent that it affects even a miyut of Klal Yisrael, it should be revisited, and I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying, because of that, to say that it shouldn't be done, careers shouldn't be pursued, even full-time employment shouldn't be undertaken, I would say that that's false. If parents have to be a little bit more active than they were in the past, to have a little bit more nimble, and they have to put in some extra sweat and extra time, extra effort, then that's what they need to do. And where that's not being done, and the kids are they're possibly going to be suffering because of that, then I don't disagree. There has to be modification.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Klein, for sharing your 40 years of chinuch experience with us.
Thank you for having me, and hatzlacha. To all.
And this is the answers to last week's halacha riddle.
Hi, Rav Dovid. My name is Nachum Parnas. I'm calling in regarding your question on the Magen Avram. I believe you asked that being that there's a mitzvah for a Melech to have a Sefer Torah. So, as you have a raya that there's a dinyan to wear tzitz b'layla, and that's why he wasn't armed in HaMitzvah b'layla. He had the Sefer Torah. So I think, it seems that there's a difference between, I think it's tefillin, tzitzis, and milah, all mitzvahs that are done in the guf adam. Actually, the milah is actually performed on the actual body, but tefillin and tzitzis, the guf is malubish and ma'uter and talis and tefillin. So I think that would be a little different than holding a Sefer Torah, which, although it's being performed by the body, it isn't being worn by the body. Maybe that's, I think you said Lashon Gemara was Ara, maybe that Lashon is used for that specific connotation, that he was literally naked of the mitzvahs that he normally wears, until he remembered that he has Milah. But I would ask a different question, if I may, that if there's no mitzvah at night to wear baged and of tzitzis, or to wear tefillin, especially according to the Rishonim that say that Laila is not as man tzitzis at all, I'm assuming that the Magen Avraham is going with the shita that says that a beged yom you mekayim something a Laila with, but according to the shita that say that the ace of Laila is not as man tzitzis, just like it's not as a man tefillin, then I would say the reason why he wasn't armed at night is because there was no mitzvah of talis and tefillin. It was only by day that he felt that he was armed. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Appreciate the show. Have a good one. Regarding your other question, I believe it was something along the lines of how can you put a beged on Shabbos and not be mechayev in tzitzis. By the same token, you should be able to slaughter an animal, even though you're not able to be mekayem tisi adam. I believe that was the question. I was thinking that there may be a difference between when you wear beged on Shabbos, you're unable to put on tzitzis because of a halachic reason, probably because of Einasedech Letzeshesh B'Kars or something like that. I think maybe the argument can be made that the mitzvah doesn't exist when halachically it's not daicha. So you aren't putting yourself into a situation where you're not able to do the kind of mitzvah. You're putting yourself into a situation where the mitzvah is obsolete. Whereas by Kisei Adam, you're putting yourself into a situation where there is a full-fledged mitzvah of Kisei Adam that you're unable to perform due to lack of material. Or you are putting yourself into a situation where a full-fledged mitzvah will become batal. All right, those are my thoughts on the two questions. Thanks a lot. Take care.